Buckle up, there's lots to talk about. Dylan Cease threw a no-hitter. We have rankings movers, week 19 preview, and Randy Arozarena was just traded to the Mariners. We'll break it all down up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaron Nola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Wilson,
Carlo and Fado, value so high, but ADP so low. Frank loves him some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on July 26th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White. Today on the show, lots to talk about. Dylan Cease threw a no-hitter. We have another prospect spotlight, rankings, risers, and fallers, week 19 preview. But we had a trade, Scott, and a pretty big one, so we are going to start there. Randy Arozarena traded over to the Mariners for a pair of prospects and a player to be named later. The prospects, outfielder Aiden Smith and right-handed pitcher Brody Hopkins. Talk about those in just a bit, but it's been a down season, Scott, for Randy Arozarena. He has been much better since the start of June. 284 batting average, 7 homers, 20 runs, 17 RBI, 9 steals since the start of June. So that's more like the player we were expecting coming in, but it's a downgrade in lineup, slight downgrade in ballpark. What are your thoughts on Arozarena to the Mariners?
I don't know that it changes his fantasy value that much. I mean, I'm just thrilled that he's gotten back on track since the start of June, and it's a bad lineup either way. The Rays are 27th in runs scored. The Mariners are 28th. I know Julio Rodriguez is out for the Mariners, but it's not like he was producing like Julio Rodriguez anyway. If you're just looking at park factors the last 3 years, overall park factor, Seattle's the worst. So it's a downgrade in venue. It is middle of the road right-handed home runs for right-handed hitters. It's middle of the pack. And if you look at the expected home runs by ballpark on Baseball Savant, so using StatCast data, some years he would have hit more home runs playing all his games in Seattle. Some years he would have hit fewer home runs. You look at his career numbers in Seattle, Randy Arozarena, it's only 11 games. So maybe it's not even worth speaking about, but the numbers are fine. In those 11 games, 289 batting average, 3 home runs, and 844 OPS. I think Randy Arozarena will probably be about the same in Seattle, and I'm not planning to move him to adjust his ranking based on this trade.
I do worry a little bit about some players we've seen go to Seattle in recent years, like Teoscar Hernandez, and he talked about how it was harder to see the ball there, and he struggled. Obviously, now he's in LA, and he's having a much better season. Mitch Garver signed there this year, and obviously has not been great. I think Randy Arozarena, probably similar caliber player to someone like Teoscar Hernandez, but everyone's different. We've seen hitters struggle in Tropicana Field where Randy Arozarena has been fine. So overall, it's probably a slight net negative for Randy Arozarena, but you're right. I think the bigger picture here is that he's been much better since the start of June, which is what we've been waiting for most of the season. Any thoughts on the return here, Scott? Aiden Smith, a 20-year-old outfielder. Brody Hopkins is a 22-year-old pitcher, and they're both at A ball, not high A. And the numbers look pretty good, but obviously, they're pretty far away. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, and Brody Hopkins, who I'm not sure I'd even heard of before, he's a 22-year-old at low A, which is always something you have to be a little skeptical of. I had heard of Aiden Smith, right?
Yeah.
I can't recall his name, but I had heard of him. That was a funny laugh I did there, right? Wow, that was a little weird. Aiden Smith, good on base skills down there. But it's not like I was considering either of these guys for my midseason top 50, which is really more like a midseason top 75. The Rays are pretty good at targeting players in the lower minors, and then they go on to become noteworthy prospects. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you today that this guy is going to be that. So I think in most dynasty leagues, they're probably too low into prospects to care about right now. We'll see who the player to be named later ends up being, because this seems like a low return for Randy Arozarena, who has 2 more years of control beyond this one. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that right now.
Yeah, and we were so close because we heard rumors of Randy to the Dodgers. They had, expressed interest in him, and obviously that would have been much better for his value. But overall, Randy Arozarena headed to the Seattle Mariners, and I think, a takeaway from the Rays perspective is I think this starts the fire sale, Scott. I mean, we're going to see, I think, other names get moved here. Isaac Paredes likely to get traded. Maybe someone like Zach Eflin, the relievers on this team, Pete Fairbanks, Jason Adam, coming out of the trade deadline, they could have someone else who's closing games for the Tampa Bay Rays. So keep all in mind. I don't think this is the last trade that they will make leading up to the deadline.
And I'm pretty confident we're going to see Junior Caminero at some point here in the next 2 months. It may not be until September, because remember, he got a little over a week in the majors last year. So if they want to preserve his rookie eligibility for next year, where he can potentially score the Rays some bonus draft picks, then they would have to wait until about the start of September to call Caminero up. Maybe they call him up before then, but they probably want to give him some runway anyway, since his rehab assignment for, I believe it was a groin strain, just recently ended. So they probably want to see him get hot down there first. But like right now, they don't have third base covered, because Isaac Paredes has moved over to first base, with Yandy Diaz being away from the team for an indefinite period of time. So Jose Caballero's been getting most of the action at third base, but he's kind of fallen out of favor. And I think if Junior Caminero is still available in your league, I understand only tangentially related to this trade, but I do think he's worth stashing.
All right, let's get into Thursday's action.
No hits for the Nats. Dylan Cease throws a no-hitter.
There you have it. Dylan Cease tossed the second no-hitter in Padres history. He allowed just 3 walks with 9 strikeouts. He had 18 whiffs on 114 pitches, 11 on the slider, 6 on the fastball, 1 on the curve. And he has been awesome over his last 3 starts. 22 shutout innings, 2 hits allowed, 30 strikeouts to 7 walks. Velocity was up in the start. He leaned on his slider even more, mentioned how good it was. And, what's been the difference for Dylan Cease this year is that he's improved the control drastically, and the velocity is up on his 2 main pitches, the fastball and the slider. Scott, it's been a great bounce back season, getting away from the White Sox, moving over to the Padres. Any thoughts here on Dylan Cease's no-hitter?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like his 3rd straight no-hitter almost, because of how few hits he's been allowing. A combined 2 hits now in his last 22 innings. That's pretty insane. And yeah, you pointed out the velocity increases on the fastball and slider during that 3-start stretch. I don't know if that's something he's going to be able to continue, but there was a point this season where you may have started to worry a little bit about Dylan Cease, because he was struggling. It wasn't in the familiar Dylan Cease way where he was walking a bunch of guys, which is why I kept the faith through it. So let me give you an exact number for that. It was a pretty long stretch, actually, an 8-start stretch, May and June, where Dylan Cease had a 6.43 ERA. But he's clearly turned things back around. And yeah, I mentioned a combined 2 hits in his last 3 starts. Well, 4 of his last 6 starts, and 4 of his last 6, Cease has allowed one hit or fewer. 1 hit or the 0 in the no-hitter here. 4 of the last 6 starts.
Yeah. So overall,
you
again,
didn't get those stats already, did you?
I did not give the 4 out of the last 6 or any of the numbers from May or June. I did mention his last 3 starts, but that's
Okay.
fine.
All right. That's fine. I'm reinforcing it. That's all.
It's all good. It's all good, Scotty. Yeah, not much else to add. There's nothing actionable here. It's obviously an awesome start, and it's a momentous outing here from Dylan C. Scott, let's go over to you, player of the night.
All right. Well, we gave plenty of plaudits to Robbie Ray and his long-awaited return yesterday. So let's do the same for Clayton Kershaw, who was facing Robbie Ray's team, the Giants, here, and his long-awaited return, his season debut. And he just did his typical Clayton Kershaw thing again. 2 earned runs in 4 innings, struck out 6, 14 swinging strikes on 72 pitches. His fastball velocity, which was down a little bit from the readings we got at AAA, it was fine in this start. It was basically identical to his average fastball velocity from the past 3 years when, again, he was just typical Clayton Kershaw. ERA, at least in the last 2, his ERA was south of 2.50. And he's just been so consistent throughout his career, even as he's dealt with all manner of injuries, elbow, back, shoulder. He misses his time and then he comes back and he performs like an ace for however long he's available. And so I kind of was just expecting that again. I'm still expecting that based on the way this return went. The velocity's looking good and everything. You don't want to get too sanguine about the possibility he's getting older, and this was maybe the most serious health issue he was coming back from. He actually had surgery on his shoulder. And so I understand not wanting to be sanguine about that, but here he is. He looks like Clayton Kershaw still, and I think he's going to be in for a very strong finish with a very good team backing him.
Yeah, I mean, the one I would say negative takeaway, he allowed some hard contact in this one, 94.6 average exit velocity, but it's his first start back from shoulder surgery. He's been working his way back up, and but the whiffs look great. As you mentioned, velocity was there for Clayton Kershaw. He's 36% started on CBS. Next week, he's at the Padres, a team that has struggled against lefties. Would you be all right getting Clayton Kershaw back in your lineups next week?
Against the Padres, you said?
Yes.
They're bad against left-handers, though that didn't work in Mitchell Parker's favor this week. I think
Sure.
maybe Mitchell Parker's just cooked, but the one potential hesitation there in shallower leagues is that Kershaw only did go 4 innings and threw 72 pitches. And so while it's encouraging what he did during that time, it's still not particularly useful in fantasy. So for him to justify a starting spot, you're going to need him to go longer than that. As far as that goes, Dave Roberts said after the game, I thought we pushed him enough to get ready for his next one. We got a nice foundation. So it doesn't sound like this is permanently Kershaw's workload threshold, but it makes you wonder, is he going to be allowed to go 6 next time? So maybe in shallower leagues, weigh your options. In deeper leagues where you have few options, I would be totally fine starting Kershaw.
Yeah, 72 pitches in his debut here. I think he can get up to 80. It's just a matter of how efficient can he pitch. And obviously you want him to get through at least 5 so he can qualify for a potential win. But yeah, I think you said it best. Shallower leagues, you might have a better option. But if not, I think I'd be totally fine rolling Clayton Kershaw out there next week. It's Friday. You know what that means. It's another prospect spotlight. Time to discuss some of the prospects who are catching our eye from a fantasy perspective, thanks to our sponsors at Hyundai, where they're thinking about every step of your journey out on the road. Let's talk about Nationals outfield prospect Dylan Cruz, 22 years old, 2nd overall pick in last year's draft. And this year in the minors, a .268 batting average, 9 home runs, 20 steals, 779 OPS between AA and AAA. Comes with a ton of pedigree, had a tremendous collegiate career. And the only thing, we haven't really seen the in-game power flash yet, Scott. That's the only, I think, drawback so far is the 9 home runs this year in the minors for Dylan Cruz. Even with that, there have been many indications that he will be called up by the Nationals before the end of this season. What's your read on Dylan Cruz right now?
Well, I don't know that I'd go as far as to say there have been many indications of that. Mark Zuckerman, who is somebody who covers the Nationals for Masson and has for a long time, he kind of wondered, kind of speculated that the Nationals could call up Dylan Cruz over the final 2 months here, either because they'll trade Lane Thomas or because in September they'll just want to audition him for a role next year while keeping his rookie eligibility intact. And it could happen. He's already moved up to AAA. Obviously, he was highly regarded number 2 overall pick last year. At that point in time, I think most evaluators liked him more than Wyatt Langford. But the production really hasn't been there. And so, I mean, if I was running the Nationals, I don't think I'd force the issue. I'm not running the Nationals, obviously, so perhaps that's irrelevant. But just if I'm thinking along with an MLB executive and the pros and cons of promoting a prospect to the majors on a particular timeline, I don't know that he's ready. I don't know that Dylan Cruz is ready. They've pushed him aggressively, and the production hasn't been there. It's been okay. It's not like he's been a disaster, but you know, 264, 337, 431 slash line doesn't exactly have the look of somebody beating, you know, he's not beating the door down.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of stolen bases, so that's nice. And I should point out that a lot of the underlying data that we more often use to gauge skill these days, or ability maybe is a better word to use there than skill, a lot of that looks great. I mean, the exit velocity readings look great. The plate discipline looks great. Since moving up to AAA, Dylan Cruz has struck out only 15.6% of the time. That's really good. So why isn't his batting average higher? Why isn't his home run output higher? I think these are fair questions. Consensus is he's still a top 5 overall prospect, even with the disappointing production. As we talked about last week, a lot of the higher end prospects haven't put up great numbers, and so that makes it hard to rank prospects right now. But you know, evaluators are keeping the faith on Dylan Cruz. I'm keeping the faith in Dylan Cruz, but it's kind of a shoulder shrug right now. I would expect him to perform better than he has so far.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed a lot of the same things. The fact that the strikeout rate is that low at AAA, he's hitting the ball hard, 112.6 max exit velocity. An issue is the ground ball rate is around 49%. So it's a little bit more elevated than you'd like. Said a similar thing about James Wood.
Yeah, well, it's not as bad as James Wood, so it's hard to fixate on it.
Right. Again, that was Dylan Cruz of the Nationals. Make sure to check out Scott's latest prospect report, which is live on the site, cbssports.com/fantasy/baseball. Thanks again to Hyundai for sponsoring this segment and the show. Learn more at HyundaiUSA.com. One last reminder, download and follow FBT in 5. That's our 5-minute podcast. Wherever you listen to podcasts, we have a bonus prospect episode coming out every Saturday of the season. Let's take our first break, and when we return, some news and notes right after this.
We need your sports news anywhere.
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
Welcome back in. Let's talk news and notes. Christian Yelich has elected to rest and rehab his back injury, delaying a potential surgery until the offseason. Ken Rosenthal added that offseason surgery is viewed as a strong possibility for Christian Yelich. So good news for now. We'll see where it goes. Perhaps he could return at some point this season, but the back is something that has given Yelich lots of issues over the past couple of years. Mason Miller was placed in the IL with a fractured pinky on his left hand. And here we go. Another just weird baseball injury. Apparently it happened when he placed his hand down awkwardly on the training table while getting ready for an exercise. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd heard it was more like a frustrated slam, but not like over the top wow, we need to get this guy in to see a psychiatrist kind of slam. Just a normal frustrated fist slam. So have you seen a timetable on that? I haven't seen one yet.
No, I haven't seen one either.
Broken left pinky, so I wonder.
I guess he needs it for his glove hand.
Yeah, he needs it to field his position, but to a certain extent, if you wrap that up well enough, I think you could potentially work through it. It just kind of depends on the extent of the fracture, I guess. We'll see.
Yeah, just do that thing, like tape it up to the other finger.
Splint it, yeah.
Right. You'll be all right.
Yeah.
My initial thought as to who the replacement would be is Lucas Erceg. I thought he would take over as the closer. He's been the 8th inning reliever, but the A's had a save situation here on Thursday, and Erceg remained in the 8th inning. It was Tyler Ferguson who got the 9th with a 1-run lead. He struck out 2 for his first save. And this year in the majors, a 3.97 ERA, a 1.15 WHIP, 10.3 K per 9. Walks have been an issue. 30 years old, kind of a journeyman type, has 16 career saves in the minors. Again, I don't know how long Mason Miller is going to be out, Scott, but if it's at least a couple of weeks, maybe it's a month, Tyler Ferguson might be the next one up for saves.
Yeah, could be. I don't know that I'd be particularly interested in anyone. I think it would become like a Rockies closer situation for me.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a little unfair, but it's it wouldn't be a major development to the majority of people who play fantasy baseball. Losing Mason Miller would be, but the replacement wouldn't be.
Yeah, for sure. And if you lost Mason Miller in a shallower league, there have been names that have emerged recently, Jeff Hoffman, and there will be kind of some dominoes that fall, as a result of people being traded and things like that. We thought Daniel Hudson would have been the closer for the Dodgers, or at least getting a majority of saves moving forward, but that might not be the case. We will touch on that a little bit later on. This Garrett Crochet trade situation, Scott, kind of interesting. It's ever developing right now. According to an article from The Athletic, Crochet desires a contract extension before he would agree to pitch in the playoffs. He also wants to remain a starter and isn't interested in transitioning back into a reliever role. And I get this from his perspective. He's a pitcher. You don't know what your shelf life is for a lot of these pitchers right now. He throws hard, and he's looking for long-term financial stability. But teams that are looking to trade for him, they might be wary of giving him an extension. So,
does he have the authority to do this? It's not like he has a no trade clause. How is he able to dictate the terms of the trade?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, can you just choose to shut it down when you get to the playoffs? I mean, if a team tells you to go out and pitch, or can you just say no? I don't know.
I mean, I don't think they obviously can't drag you out and make you pitch, but there would be a reprimand if you didn't. The extent of which probably depends on how good you are, but yeah, I don't know. That's I really don't know what to make of that, but I totally understand it from his perspective. If you're going to risk injury by overuse, you'd like to have some financial security. There doesn't seem to be a precedent for this that I'm aware of.
Yeah, so I think the overarching theme now is that it's not so much a guarantee that Garrett Crochet will be traded. I think before this report, we all would have said he's probably the biggest name most likely to be moved ahead of the deadline or right at the deadline. So not a guarantee now. John Heyman also added that the White Sox do not plan to move Crochet back to the bullpen or to shut him down at any point this season. But we've already seen them limit him over recent starts. So I'm not exactly sure what to believe. I think that if he stays with the White Sox, that is obviously much worse for his value. And I do think that they will continue to limit him somehow. To what extent? I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question.
Well, it doesn't seem like he wants to be limited based on everything I've been reading. I don't know if you and Chris got to this after Garrett Crochet's start last time, but what was reported on the White Sox official website, I'll just read directly from that. Crochet felt, so this is Crochet's own perspective, Crochet felt Tuesday was a special circumstance given the extended break and shortened outings in his first. I'm having trouble reading. Let me start over. Crochet felt Tuesday was a special circumstance given the extended break and shortened outings in his first start of the first half and his appearance in the All-Star game. He plans to rebuild back up into a normal starting workload going forward. So, from Crochet's own perspective, I don't want to go 4 innings at a time, you know? And so I don't know if that's wishful thinking on his part, but it also sounds like from that other report about him needing to secure a long-term deal that he is mindful of his health. So that just makes it more confusing. And maybe they're just using it as an excuse to get a payday for a pitcher who's obviously had trouble staying healthy and could turn back into a pumpkin next year. Not that I'm expecting that, but it could. Want to cash in on this breakthrough season he's had. I don't know. I don't know. It's pretty hard to pin down at this point for a number of different reasons.
As it's been all season, Garrett Crochet, one of the toughest players to rank in fantasy baseball right now. We did have another trade earlier in the night. The D-backs are acquiring AJ Puck in exchange for Davison De Los Santos and outfielder Andrew Pintar. And Puck will serve as a setup reliever for Paul Sewald. But I think the Marlins side becomes more interesting because we all assume that if Tanner Scott was traded, that AJ Puck would be next up for saves. Obviously, that's not going to be the case. I think my next guest would be Andrew Nardi. It might not matter all that much because the Marlins are really bad and they're only going to get worse after the trade deadline. So, and Andrew Nardi could be traded himself too. So we'll see what happens there. I think more actionable is the other side of this trade, Scott. Davison De Los Santos is having a monster season in the minors. And I wonder if we could see him up with the Marlins at some point this season. So down in the minors, batting .325, 28 home runs, and OPS over 1,000 between AA and AAA as a 21-year-old. I know he was a Rule 5 draft pick. He went to the Guardians. He came back to the D-backs. So it's been a weird path, a weird year for De Los Santos. But the age-to-level production is pretty stellar. Pretty amazing what he's done so far this season. What are your thoughts? Do you think he can factor in fantasy this year?
He could. Obviously, going to the Marlins helps his cause of factoring at some point in the majors. It's a difficult profile because he's a corner man who bats right-handed and really should probably just be playing first base. And there's always a narrow path for that guy, but it sounds like the path could be wide open in the Marlins. So I have more hope for Davison De Los Santos' future than I ever have before. We talked about this before, but I do think the production's a bit of a fake out. AA and AAA for the Diamondbacks is so very hitter friendly. He does genuinely hit the ball very hard, but obviously there's the ones that aren't hit as hard. You're still being helped by the environment, how far the less hit hard ones travel. So many different factors there. But the biggest reason I'm skeptical of Davison De Los Santos, beyond the narrow path that I talked about, he swings at 44% of the pitches he sees outside of the zone. That's a lot. That is a lot. It's a high chase rate, and we often see these sort of plotting mashers who put up huge minor league numbers. We often see them crumble against major league pitchers just because they chase too much. Now he's 21, and so maybe he'll get better. But that does seem like a big liability for Davison De Los Santos. And I think the most likely scenario for him is that he becomes somebody who's up and down from the minors and never really finds his footing. Sort of like Jean-Kinsey Noel. Maybe he has the same sort of thing where maybe he could have a path to being a Franmil Reyes type, but I'm not counting on that. Again, being with the Marlins helps his cause. I don't see Davison De Los Santos as like this monster prospect, though, despite what the numbers say. That is the long-winded message I'm trying to give here.
All right, Tristan Casas has been taking full batting practice and could be ready for a rehab assignment by the end of this week. Brian Reynolds was placed on the bereavement list and will miss a few days worth of action. Giancarlo Stanton is not expected to be activated this weekend. He's still rehabbing his hamstring injury. Starling Marte hopes to begin a running progression this week. He's on the IL with a bone bruise in his right knee. Jorge Mateo was officially placed on the IL with a left elbow subluxation. Connor Norby was recalled and had pretty big game here in his first game back. The Giants are planning to move Jordan Hicks to the bullpen and could do so as soon as this weekend. Alex Cobb would likely take his spot in the rotation. The Orioles.
Well, it seems like the bigger development with that, because we were already counting on Alex Cobb taking a spot. Hayden Burnsong seems like he should be able to stick around if Jordan Hicks is headed to the bullpen.
Yes, that would certainly help. After that huge start we got in Coors Field, want to see how Birdsong can build off of that. The Orioles option Chase McDermott back to AAA. Chris Taylor was placed in the IL with a left groin strain. James Outman was recalled. Tyler McGill will be recalled to start Saturday against the Braves. He'll take Christian Scott's place in the rotation. And the latest trade rumors, the Giants are open to trade offers on Blake Snell. The Pirates are scouting both Jazz Chisholm and Brian De La Cruz. The Rockies are telling teams they won't be trading Ryan McMahon. The Astros are among teams that have interest in Jameson Taillon. And in an article from Ken Rosenthal, he said Carlos Estevez and Tanner Scott are likely to be moved, which we expected all along. All right, Scott, let's talk about some rankings, risers, and fallers. We actually haven't had this segment in quite some time because, some of the tomfoolery with the All-Star break and, us taking some days off and all that stuff. But we're back, and we've updated the rankings. Who were a few names that either moved up or down for you?
Okay, so some names that moved up and down for me. Matt Olson. I referred to this on yesterday's show. I finally moved him out of the 3 spot at first base, which in the minds of many people is probably too late. But if nothing else, it's an acknowledgement that we've arrived at a point in the season where I can't just point to track record and say it's all going to be fine. And you could argue that it should have happened earlier, but I feel like part of my job is to, with these like uber talented stud caliber players, when they're underachieving for a long time, to keep the faith in them, to trust in regression to mean and track record, and that talent eventually wins out in the end, and that it can turn on a dime. And that is still the case for Matt Olson and anyone else who's underachieving. But there is also the matter of winning and being at a point in the season where you can't afford to lose ground. If you're in the race, you gotta keep up. You got to keep up the production at this point. And since there's no timeline for Matt Olson turning things around, and we're on a clear timeline at this point, I think you have to adjust your expectations if you haven't already. I've only moved him down to 7th, so that's putting him behind Vladimir Guerrero, Josh Naylor, Christian Walker, Pete Alonso, who himself has moved down a little bit. So it's not like I'm disregarding that potential for him to have a light bulb moment and then just hit 25 homers the rest of the way. It's unlikely, but it's possible for somebody with Matt Olson's skill set. But yeah, I can't be so Pollyannish about it to keep him 3rd in my rankings. Okay, so that's one player who's moved down. Okay, who else here? So George Springer and Randy Arozarena actually both moved up quite a bit since they appear to be back on track from their season-long slumps. Arozarena has gotten inside the top 20, and George Springer has gone from 35th to 27th. So he's moved ahead of Elliot Ramos and James Wood and Jackson Merrill. And I think that's George Springer is representative of why I'm reluctant to move these players with high-end long-term track records, because he struggled for a long time and suddenly he looks must start again. It can change very quickly, as I was just saying for Olsen. I mentioned I moved him ahead of Jackson Merrill. Merrill's somebody I moved down about 10 spots in the outfield, 24th to 34th. And I mentioned just the other day how after that 9-homer June, he has yet to homer in July. And it's not like there were a lot of underlining changes in the batted ball profile to explain Jackson Merrill's sudden power surge. And a big riser at starting pitcher for me is Michael King. And we talked about that after his last start, 2.21 ERA, 105 whip, 10.7 K per nine in his last 10 now. So he's up to 34th. He's moved ahead of other two-face standouts, is how I describe it in the article. Moved ahead of other two-face standouts, Luis Heel, Bailey Ober, and Christopher Sanchez. That's Michael King. And a pitcher who I've downgraded quite a bit is Mackenzie Gore, 59th to 77th in my starting pitcher rankings, which basically moves him out of the must-roster range for 12-team leagues. He's had issues going deep into games. He's totally lost command and has, in a way that's probably related to some of the delivery issues he's had in the past. And it's really hard to trust in Mackenzie Gore right now.
I agree. Yeah, I dropped Mackenzie Gore outside of my top 70 starting pitchers. Michael King, I'm right there with you. I actually moved him up to SP 32. So take that, Scott. Not only did I one-up you, I guess I two-upped
me.
Yeah, Michael King. Pitching well. A couple risers for me. Lawrence Butler, I moved up to outfielder 43. Feels like, I don't know, maybe he should be even higher than that, because I think he needs to be rostered in 3 outfielder leagues. I mean, just how hot that he is right now. Another huge game here on Thursday, 2 for 5 with a sock and a shoe, his 11th home run, his 7th steal. And I love the fact that he got a chance to start against a lefty, lead off against a lefty, and then he produced. He hit that home run. He had a double against that left-handed starting pitcher in the first inning as well. And I saw this stat on the Angels broadcast. Butler is the 7th player with at least 21 hits, 20 RBI, 5 doubles, 2 triples, and 6 homers in a 12-game span. The other 6 players, Joe DiMaggio, Willie Mays, Hank Greenberg, Mel Ott, Chuck Klein, and Christian Yelich. So pretty good company there for Lawrence Butler. 70% rostered. Find a way. I don't know what you got to do, but find a way to get that man on your roster. He should not be
43, you said you moved Butler to in the outfield?
Yep.
Because I moved him to 44. It always amazes me how without any consultation we get that close.
Seriously, yeah. I looked at it. I like to compare our rankings after I'm done with everything, just to see, all right, am I way off on anything? Am I, and I noticed the same thing. Like, we're right there on Lawrence Butler. So bordering on a must roster in 3 outfielder leagues, but I think we're pretty much there. Another big riser is Taj Bradley, who I got inside my top 30 starting pitchers now. He's up to SP 28, and he had another great start here on Thursday as well. 6 shutout innings, 7 strikeouts, had 13 whiffs on 83 pitches. And last 9 starts for Taj Bradley, a .82 ERA, a .89 whip, 65 strikeouts over 55 innings. Velocity was down in this start, so I think that's something we need to watch moving forward. But obviously, he has been amazing over his last 9 starts.
He has. You have him 28th. I have him 31st. So we're close there too. And top 20 potential, I would say, if he continues this. It's just an abundance of caution. The only reason I don't already have him that high, and the fact that we've seen young pitchers have stretches like this where they look like big time breakthrough aces, and then reality smacks them in the face. So I don't want to go overboard in moving up Taj Bradley, but 31st for a player with this limited experience, I think is a strong vote of confidence.
And I could tell you that ranking starting pitchers on Thursday, 13 to 25, I don't really know what to do with right now. And it's kind of all up in the air. That stretch for me is Garrett Crochet, Imanaga, Pablo Lopez, Sonny Gray, Joe Ryan, Zach Gallen, Logan Webb, Freddie Peralta, Justin Steele, Jack Flaherty, Grayson Rodriguez, Ranger Suarez, and Garrett Cole. So some names that have underperformed, guys that have let us down, Garrett Cole, Ranger Suarez, who's kind of regressed lately. So it's just kind of a messy range in the starting pitcher rankings right now. Two fallers for me. Bryson Stott is down to my 13th ranked second baseman, 18th at shortstop. Second base, really not a great position outside of the top, 4 or 5. Even guys like, Bryce Terang has slowed down and Jordan Westberg has slowed down a little bit too. So just not really a great position overall. That's why he's a little bit lower in shortstop, just because it's a better position there. And Adolis Garcia down to outfielder 26. Since the start of May, Garcia is batting 178 with a 566 OPS. And it's similar to Matt Olson, Scott, where I think Garcia is more talented than this. We're just running out of time. He's been really bad for 3 out of 4 months of the season. So, it's we're kind of in free fall mode right now for Adolis Garcia.
And you said that was what for Adolis Garcia?
26th.
Yeah, I dropped him even lower. I dropped him to about 30th, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm there with you. As far as second base goes, you talked about moving Bryson Stott down, and I did as well. But that range at second base, when you get past like the Bryce Terang, Jordan Westberg, Maikel Garcia. So I guess we're talking like 9 through 19. I have no idea what order to put those guys in, because they're mostly ones who I think are better than they've shown so far, which includes Stott and includes Xander Bogaerts and Andres Jimenez, Gleyber Torres. At this point, I probably just need to look at what Brandon Lau has been doing lately and move him up about 10 spots, because at least he's producing. I don't mean to, and I don't like being that reactive, but I do think Brandon Lau is good. If we want to get into what he did today, 4 for 4 with a home run and 2 doubles. And since June 1st, Brandon Lau's batting .285 with 11 home runs. So again, I think a lot of people were tempted to write him off early this season as he was contending with injury. And it's not like the little bit we saw of him was that productive, but everything's returned to normal for Brandon Lau. He looks like one of the best sluggers at the position. Does sit sometimes against lefties, which limits the appeal and the overall ceiling, but he is actually producing at a position where I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction overall.
Yeah, I don't even know that he needs to sit against lefties. I know that he does, but this year against lefties, he's batting .324 with 2 homers and a .937 OPS. He's actually been better against lefties than righties this season. That's Brandon Lau.
It hasn't been all lefties, to be clear. I think he started against 2 of the last 4 the Rays have faced. But yeah, he does sit against some.
He's 63% rostered, Brandon Lau. Who would you rather have, him or Colt Keith, who's had a big month as well?
Well, I mean, we've seen it so many times before from Lau that I'm inclined to go Lau there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Let's take our final break, and when we return, we will talk about some other waiver wire options. We'll preview Week 19. We'll do that right after this. Welcome back in. Some waiver wire hitters from Thursday's action. And we already spoke about Brandon Lau, who was at the top of the list. Josh Bell is picking things back up, 2 for 5 with his 12th home run. He's homered in 3 of his last 4 games, 34% rostered. I think we know who Josh Bell is, right, Scott? I mean, I don't think, is there any excitement here? Not really, right?
Not really.
Yeah. What about Connor Norby in a second? His teammate, Colton Cowser, who I mentioned yesterday, has started to heat up again here in the second half. 1 for 3 with a walk and a 3-run homer, his 14th of the season. 6 games in the second half. He has 8 hits, 2 homers, and 2 steals. And 53% rostered. The Orioles have 8 games next week. And as far as I could tell, at least one lefty on the schedule.
Just one from what I can tell.
Any interest, Scott, in picking Colton Cowser back up if he was dropped?
Yeah, if you need outfield help. We've already done the Colton Cowser has broken out thing this year, so I'm reluctant to get fully behind that again. He has strikeout issues. He has swing and miss issues in the zone. Very low zone contact rate. And that is a big hurdle to overcome. But he's very hot right now. He's in a good lineup. He has great matchups. The best matchups, in fact, for next week. So if you need outfield help, I don't see why you wouldn't look to Colton Cowser.
And 2 other names we mentioned both on yesterday's podcast, but Connor Norby returned with a bang, 2 for 4 with his second home run. He hit it to the opposite field. And in his 5 games played, he's 5 for 18 with 2 home runs with the Orioles. And Xavier Edwards stayed hot, 2 for 4 with a steal and 2 RBI. He was moved up to second in the Marlins lineup here on Thursday. And since being recalled earlier in July, Edwards is batting .388 with 11 runs scored, 5 steals, and .889 OPS. I think both are pretty interesting, Scott. Connor Norby and Xavier Edwards. It might depend on the need. In a vacuum, I think I'd probably just take the shot on Edwards. What do you think?
I would agree. I think. Xavier Edwards has such a difficult profile to land, period. The slap hitter. A lot of speed and really good minor league track record there. 330 this year, about 350 last year is the batting average. But it's just not a profile that works in the modern game very often. And it's him in the Marlins lineup, a non-power hitter in a really bad lineup. So he's got to steal a lot of bases for it to work out, which he could. But again, that's asking a lot. Connor Norby, I have. It's maybe a little more conventional of a profile for the modern game, but I just think it's a really tough fit for that ballpark because he doesn't have a lot of raw power. It has to be pull side, a row or 2 deep into the left field seats, and those left field seats are very deep at Camden Yards. This home run wasn't hit at Camden Yards. They were on the road. So it doesn't really say anything one way or the other, whether it's going to work. I guess it just depends what you want your gamble to be on. I think the overall ceiling for Connor Norby, particularly given the lineup difference, is higher. But I think he's less likely to meet that ceiling.
Mm-hmm. One lonely waiver wire pitcher from Thursday. Gavin Williams turned in a quality start up against the Tigers. 6 innings, 3 runs, 9 strikeouts, had 17 whiffs on 105 pitches. 6 of those on the fastball, 4 on the slider, 4 on the curve. And according to StatCast, he upped his slider usage to 19%, which is what we wanted to see from Gavin Williams. The velocity was also up 3 miles per hour. I still wonder, Scott, if there's a classification issue, if they're looking at the slider like it's a cutter or vice versa, or maybe he's kind of blended a cutter and a slider together, and this is what has come out. But
he had thrown, according to his StatCast page currently, Gavin Williams had thrown 2 sliders all year.
Right.
Which I recall going start by start, it not being quite that low, the slider usage. So I don't even know if things have been changing after starts, in between starts already with the classification of those pitches. I suspect just because it was so many more sliders than he's thrown this year and the velocity was way different, that it was probably the cutter he was throwing. And so nothing's really changed, but the result was a lot better, particularly the number of whiffs that Gavin Williams got was definitely encouraging. 9 strikeouts, 17 whiffs. Tigers lineup, which is not great. It's not as bad as we once perceived it to be, but it's not great. And something Gavin Williams could maybe take advantage of. So I don't know. I think the jury's still out. This was an encouraging start overall, but it's not like he relieved all my concerns in this start.
Yeah, 71% rostered is Gavin Williams. He's at the Tigers again next week. Solid matchup. I don't love a young pitcher facing the same lineup 2 starts in a row, but I think it's fine. And, outside of Robbie Ray, who I think is the clear top waiver wire pitcher ad right now, I think Gavin Williams is still second for me just in terms of upside and just someone I'm excited about. I don't know if you feel differently, Scott. Is there any other? I feel like we haven't had many waiver wire pitchers come across lately.
I mean, just going top of mind,
The most added right now are Robbie Ray, Luis Ortiz, Hayden Birdsong, Michael Waka. So
yeah, I guess Gavin Williams would be atop that list for me too.
yeah, outside of Robbie Ray, of course. Let's get into our Week 19 preview, and we will start off with the schedule for next week. All over the place, too. We have teams with 5 games. We have one team with 8 games. 5 teams with 5 games next week. The Dodgers, the A's, the Padres, Giants, and Rays. We have 19 teams with 6 games. We have 5 teams that have 7 games. The Braves, Cubs, Royals, Cardinals, and Blue Jays. And the one team with 8 games, the aforementioned Orioles. What about the Rockies for next week? They have 6 games. All of them are on the road. So get those Brendan Rodgers, Charlie Blackmon, get those guys out of your lineups in deeper leagues if you can. Starter sit these 2-star pitchers, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but it seems like a pretty light week for 2-star pitchers next week, right?
Yeah, with all those 5-game schedules, and the Mets are going 6-man, so they don't have a 2-star pitcher this week, and they're not the only team like that. So yeah, it's a short list overall. And there are some good options that are, well, maybe good. Maybe good's a stretch. I don't like having to pick so many sleeper pitchers because I'm generally picking from bad ones. But there are a number to choose from among that limited 2-start slate.
Yeah, and we will get to those 2-star pitchers to add and stream. Some names that were just below that list, I'll just run them by you anyway. Lance Lynn is home against the Rangers and at the Cubs.
I could do it in a points league. He's been decent lately.
Alec Marsh at the White Sox at the Tigers.
He has not been decent lately, but those matchups are so good, White Sox and Tigers, that again, I could do it in a points league. Not saying it's a must, but if you want that extra start, Alec Marsh's matchups are really good.
Mitchell Parker at the D-backs and home against the Brewers.
He's just been terrible lately, so I think he's out.
Andre Palante home against the Rangers and at the Cubs.
It could go okay, but the upside's pretty underwhelming.
Yariel Rodriguez at the Orioles at the Yankees.
Rough matchups there. I know the Yankees haven't been hitting well lately, but I'm still scared of them from a matchups perspective.
And Cooper Criswell home against the Mariners and at the Rangers.
Not feeling it.
All right. Who are some 2-star pitchers that you do like, relative turn, to add and stream for next week?
Well, I really like Michael Waka, who seems to make this list every week now. He has those same great matchups that Alec Marsh has, White Sox and Tigers. So I think he's a must. Matt Waldron still qualifies for this list. He gets the Dodgers. Not so great, but a knuckleballer, the element of surprise with that pitch, the unfamiliarity. I don't know that matchups matter that much, and it's kind of bared out just in his last couple turns. Solid starts against good offenses. I think that could hold true for Waldron against the Dodgers, but even more so, he gets the Rockies in a second start away from Coors Field, obviously. You got to like that. Jameson Taillon has great numbers on the year. I don't necessarily expect it to continue, but he's at least a really good control pitcher who works deep into games at Cincinnati versus St. Louis. Decent enough matchups there. Simeon Woods Richardson has limited damage as a fly ball pitcher this year at the Mets. That's a little scary, but then he gets the White Sox in his second turn. Colin Ray, don't trust him any further than I can throw him, any further than he could throw me, which is probably a little farther than I could throw him because he's a major league pitcher. Colin Ray gets the Braves and the Nationals. For the year now, the Nationals have actually outscored the Braves.
Wow.
Which, yeah, is to say that the Braves are a pretty good matchup at this point. I think it would be, we've resisted that idea all season long, but now Ozzy Albies is out forever, and until they get Matt Olson going and get Michael Harris back, I think it's a pretty weak lineup. So Colin Ray, even though I don't trust him, 2 good matchups there. Jordan Montgomery, 2 good matchups as well. Nationals and Pirates, and a start aside from the one blip just before he went on the IL. He's been solid lately. Has Jordan Montgomery.
And his first start back was okay. I think it was 5 innings, 1 run. So hopefully he builds up the pitch count, and those matchups are pretty good for Jordan Montgomery. The single start streamers got 3 names here on the list. Robbie Ray, we've talked a lot about, looked great in his debut. He is home against the Oakland A's. You have Andrew Heaney at the Cardinals, and then Brian Bayo versus the Mariners. I know I have sworn off Brian Bayo, but without Julio Rodriguez, I don't care that Randy Arozarena is on the team now. I think the Mariners are still one of the best matchups in baseball. So,
yeah, yep. I think there's a matchup. I like the matchups for Brian Bayo, and that's why he's on here. Plus, he's pitched well lately. That Robbie Ray matchup against the Athletics, it's mostly because of Robbie Ray rather than the fact he's facing the Athletics. The Athletics have actually climbed a lot.
Yeah.
In terms of runs scored with all of the scoring they've been doing lately. Not such a favorable matchup at the moment, it would seem, but still got to run Robbie Ray out there against them after what he did to the Giants. I mean, the Dodgers. He's on the Giants.
Yeah. The Oakland A's, by the way, for the season against left-handed pitching, they are 14th in WOBA. So middle of the pack. It's not a cakewalk anymore for the Oakland A's, but obviously Robbie Ray was awesome in his debut. The best hitter matchups for next week: the Orioles, Braves, Cubs, Angels, and Royals. The worst hitter matchups: the A's, Phillies, Red Sox, Marlins, and Dodgers. With that said, Scott, who are your sleeper hitters for week 19?
So I'll start with the Orioles since they have the best matchups. We mentioned only one left-hander on the schedule in their 8 games as of now. So I think that makes Colton Cowser, with as hot as he's been, a favorable start. I also think it makes Ryan O'Hearn a favorable start since he really just plays against righties. He'll have a lot of opportunities to do damage against them this week. Also, platoon considerations here. The Angels face 3 lefties in their 6 games. That's a nice ratio of lefties. They have the 4th best hitter matchups. And I don't know if you've noticed, but your guy, Zach Neto, against lefties this year, 429 batting average, 1047 OPS. So Zach Neto is actually my number 1 sleeper hitter for this week, and he's been hitting pretty well lately. Had a stolen base here on Thursday. Yeah. Okay. So Cubs have the 3rd best matchups, only 1 lefty on the schedule. That means you got to get Michael Busch in there. Nationals, pretty good matchups, only 1 lefty on the schedule. That means you get Jesse Winker and Luis Garcia in there. You know this by now. Carlos Santana has been very productive of late, and 3 lefties on the schedule for the Twins. He is even better against lefties than righties. So not Zach Neto good against lefties, but better is Carlos Santana. 307 with a 937 OPS. So good time to start him. I have Michael Toglia in here, even though the Rockies are on the road. A lot of his home runs this year have come on the road. And the matchups for the Rockies, even though they're on the road, are very good. So I think Toglia is one you can use. You could also use Ezekiel Tovar. He doesn't qualify for this list, but his road splits are actually surprisingly good. I just wanted to confirm. Yeah, Michael Tolia's 3-homer game just before the All-Star break. That was on the road. Let's see who else here. Jeff McNeil, who's been on a power binge for some reason lately. I like him. And Nate Lowe, he's been hot too. Decent matchups for those 2 guys, and I think worth using as hot hand plays.
Again, those are your sleepers heading into week 19. Let's wrap up with some leftovers and 2 veteran pitchers who are going through it right now, Scott. Chris Bassett has had a pretty bad July, 5 innings, 3 runs, 6 strikeouts. Not an awful start here, but the bigger picture for July starts: a 6.23 ERA, a 162 whip. And the other one struggling is Logan Webb at the Dodgers. Obviously, very tough matchup, but 5 innings, 9 hits allowed, 4 earned runs, 3 walks for Logan Webb. He has 7 walks over his last 2 starts, 4 strikeouts. He had 11 whiffs on 89 pitches. The changeup just has not been there consistently for Logan Webb, at least not to the level that it was last year. And over his last 3 starts, an 8.44 ERA and a 2.06 WHIP. Scott, what's going on here? Is this just a blip? Chris Bassitt and Logan Webb.
Well, with Webb, I think it probably is a blip. We were worried about the changeup early on, I think rightfully, but he's been great for the most part. He actually made an all-star team for the first time this year. And you look at the ERA estimators for him, they still look great. His FIP is 294. His xFIP is 328. His xERA is higher. It's over 4. The xERA is always higher for Logan Webb. It seems to not gauge him very well. So I'm not so stressed about him. The control issues are out of character, and that's something that was pointed out after the game that they're not used to seeing that from Logan Webb. But it's a 3-start stretch, and famously for Garrett Crochet and Luis Heel, there's that number 3, that biblical number 3. It just keeps popping up over and over again. And obviously, if you didn't panic over Crochet or Heel, you were right not to. And I think there's even less reason to panic over Logan Webb. A little more worried about Chris Bassitt. He's kind of had a tendency to be awful at the start of the year, but then just take off mid-season and end up with really fine numbers overall. And it hasn't really happened so far. And we're kind of running out of season for him. He hasn't been a total disaster, but he's been kind of Kyle Gibson-like and not exactly who we thought we were getting. So I don't know that Chris Bassitt is a drop, but I haven't been starting him in my shallower leagues as much as I thought I would.
Yeah, a 141 WHIP for Chris Bassitt. I mean, that is bad. Walks have been a big problem for him. 3.6 walks per 9, his highest since 2016. One thing I did want to add just on both of these pitchers, because they're kind of similar in that they're not big whiff guys. Their swinging strike rates are both down even more this season, both Logan Webb and Chris Bassitt. So more balls in play. They're also giving up more line drives and more harder contact this year. So you're missing less bats and you're giving up harder contact when the ball is put in play. I think that kind of explains some of the whip issues for both of these guys, Chris Bassitt and Logan Webb this season. Some other pitching leftovers. Corbin Burnes turned in a quality start at the Marlins, 7 1/3, 3 runs allowed, 5 strikeouts, did have 17 whiffs on 96 pitches. Max Scherzer bounced back with a strong start up against the White Sox, 6 innings, 1 run, 9 strikeouts, 20 whiffs on 85 pitches. Very encouraging there. And Chris Sale, another great start at the Mets, 7 1/3 innings, 2 runs, 9 strikeouts, 14 whiffs on 94 pitches. I believe he had 4 strikeouts through 5, and then he just started striking everyone out. I had that game on in the background, and yeah, he did Chris Sale things. But anything to add on him, Scherzer and Corbin Burnes?
Yeah, I mean, I almost went with Scherzer as my player of the night because this was such a big turnaround from his last start, which he left with arm fatigue. And I think our reaction on this podcast was, I don't know that you can count on much from Max Scherzer this year. This was his best start, clearly. Kind of a retro Max Scherzer start. And I noticed that, he got 10 whiffs just on his slider. The whiff rate, season-long whiff rate on all of his secondary pitches is very good. The overall swinging strike rate isn't up to Max Scherzer levels, but it's clear that he's still able to get whiffs on those secondary pitches and that there's a high ceiling associated with that. So I think it mostly comes down to health for Max Scherzer. Clearly that arm fatigue wasn't a big deal. He came out of this start healthy. I don't know. I had him benched in one league and meanwhile started Albert Suarez and Garrett Cole. Well, Max Scherzer's numbers were on my bench, so I'm pretty angry about that. I don't think I'm going to sit Scherzer again in that league if I can help it.
Yeah, 54% started is Scherzer. And
It was against the White Sox. I do think that is worth noting.
Yeah.
But I just the underlying stuff looks good in this start, so I think he would have fared well against most any lineup.
At the Cardinals next week, you're good with that for sure.
Yeah, I'm good with that for Scherzer.
And some hitting leftovers. Marcus Semien has picked things back up in July after a pretty rough June. So far in July, 304 batting average, 4 homers, 15 runs scored, 914 OPS for Semien. And Francisco Lindor is on another level right now, 1 for 4 with his 22nd home run. This one came off of Chris Sale. He has 5 homers in his past 4 games and is now up to 22 homers, 20 steals, and 821 OPS on the season. Some bullpen updates for the Orioles. Craig Kimbrell got the 9th inning with a 3-run lead. He gave up exactly 3 runs, one of those earned on 2 walks and 2 hits. He took his 6th blown save. The Orioles did wind up winning this game in extra innings. For the Tigers, Jason Foley entered in the 7th with a 3-run lead, facing the heart of the Guardians lineup. He recorded 2 outs but gave up a hit. He was relieved by Andrew Chafin. It was Shelby Miller who got the 9th inning. He walked 1 but picked up his 2nd save. Is there any rhyme or reason to the Tigers bullpen right now, Scott? And does it matter?
I think Jason Foley's still the one to have if you have to have any. But I don't think there's someone waiting in the wings who's going to set everything right. I mean, Tyler Holton got a save last time we talked about the Tigers bullpen, and I think he's been the opener in 2 games since then, including this one.
Yeah. For the Rangers, Kirby Yates was unavailable. David Robertson pitched the final 2 innings for his 2nd save. And the Dodgers, Dave Roberts does not care about your fantasy team. Daniel Hudson entered in the 6th inning with a 2-run lead, facing 8, 9, and 1 in the Giants lineup. Evan Phillips then got the 7th inning with a 2-run lead, facing 3, 4, and 5 in the Giants lineup. The Giants then tied the game in the top of the 8th. The Dodgers retook the lead in the bottom of the 8th. And it was who? Brent Honeywell, who got the 9th inning. He gave up a hit, but picked up his 1st save. I have no idea, Scott. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick one Dodgers reliever to roster, I think I'd still say Daniel Hudson. But not with nearly as much excitement as I would have said 3 days ago. And probably did say 3 days ago.
Yeah, well, we were on that same boat together, Scott. So, yeah, looked like things were trending up, and maybe they still are for Daniel Hudson, but this usage was a little bit frustrating. Maybe the answer is that they will wind up trading for somebody. Who? I don't know. Tanner.
I'd rather have Hudson than any Tigers reliever. I feel confident saying that.
I agree. Would you rather have Hudson or Jeff Hoffman right now?
I mean, Hoffman continues not to go the way we think it's going to go either.
Yeah.
But just in the last couple days, I think I'd move Hoffman ahead of Hudson. Close, though. Probably back to back.
Okay. To stream or not to stream for Friday, some names we could look at for streaming. Andrew Heaney at the Blue Jays. Brian Bayo versus the Yankees. Drew Thorpe home against the Mariners. Luis Ortiz at the D-backs. Kyle Freeland on the road.
The only one I'm that enthusiastic about is Heaney at the Blue Jays. Drew Thorpe at the Mariners is probably second best. Just because it's the Mariners.
Mm-hmm. Kyle Harrison gets the Rockies in San Francisco. Does that matter?
I'm not eager to do it.
Yeah, me neither. On Saturday, we have Spencer Schwellenbach, who is at the Mets. Don't love the matchup, but do like the pitcher. What else? Aaron Savali gets the Marlins. We have Kyle Gibson, who gets the Nationals. Hayden Birdsong, as part of that doubleheader, gets the Rockies in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are pretty interesting. I will say, I just don't know what order to put them, but Schwellenbach, Gibson, and Birdsong are my 3 favorite. I probably go Schwellenbach first, even though it's the toughest matchup.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I would put him and then Birdsong and then Kyle Gibson at the bottom of that list. On Sunday, we get John Gray at the Blue Jays. We have David Peterson is not facing the Mets because he's on the Mets. He is facing the Braves, but I don't. Well, maybe we do. You mentioned it's a good matchup. Tobias Myers gets the Marlins. That's pretty good. Jose Soriano against the Oakland A's. Yeah, I think those are fine. I think I would go Myers, Soriano, John Gray.
I think so too. Gray finally had a good start last time out against the White Sox. I did mention the Athletics offense is looking strong right now, but mostly because they hit a lot of home runs and Jose Soriano, an extreme ground ball pitcher. So he might be able to neutralize that lineup.
All right, we are going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.